Hello everybody, my name is Shivs. I am a UK player. I am Warlord rank online, but I also do compete in tournaments. I have some good results, so I hope that I can use that experience to guide you guys on how to play Menat. And I want to do this in a way where it's friendly to players who are completely new to fighting games, as well as applicable to players who have some kind of experience, or even people who are quite advanced and just want to learn how to play Menat in general. For that reason, I'm going to try and simplify things as much as possible and explain it. What I would say is, after these guides are all uploaded, all these different parts, please do contact me either on my Twitch, the comment section on YouTube, or Discord. Let me know what concerns you have, and I will try to create a bonus video in which I cover all of these topics. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoy, and I'm looking forward to making this guide for you guys. Right, so we're now going to look at Menat's normals, and we really want to look at this character's normals because they're quite unique. When I say this, I mean that she is a character with orbed and orbless neutral, and her normals for the most part change depending on whether the orb is present in her hand or not. And you're gonna want to learn these really well, because there are gonna be times when you're not gonna have this orb within your hand. There are gonna be times when you want to play orbless. So we're gonna look at her different normals, and we're gonna sort of talk about what they do. So let's start with the stand light kick. A stand light kick looks like this, it animates like this, and it's her fastest normal. It has 3 frames of startup. It doesn't have the greatest range in the world, as you can see, but it is also quite good in the fact that it doesn't change depending on whether she has the orb in her hand or not. So you can use the stand light kick as part of your defense in checking your opponent's fake pressure. You can use it on offense to pressure your opponent or to combo. So her stand light kick is quite useful, and it's something that you will use a lot as Menat. We're going to move on next, and we're going to look at her stand light punch with orb. So her stand light punch with orb looks like this. The orb gives it that extra bit of range. As you can see here, stand light punch connects at this range. It has 5 frames of startup, and it is quite useful in a way of poking against your opponent. As you can see, the range is really good, and it isn't the slowest button in the world. It's not the fastest for a light. Usually lights are 3 to 4 frames on average per character. So it's not the fastest, but it's also not the slowest in the world. Has good range, and can often be used not only just to poke, but also to punish opponents' moves that are within 5 frames. 5 frames or more. So something that is -5 or more in this game. We're gonna next look at the stand medium punch with orb. So it animates something like this. As you can see, it has a lot more range than the stand light punch and the stand light kick. So you would use this normal as a poke when you want to keep your opponent away from you. And that is Menat's purpose at the end of the day. She is a zoner. So you're going to want to use this stand medium punch as a way to poke your opponent and keep them away. It has 6 frames of startup, so just 1 more than the stand light punch. And it is a really good normal for just annoying your opponent, playing a really nice hit and run style, zoning style. So it is something that you're going to use a lot as Menat. Next we have her stand medium kick. This normal doesn't have as much range as her stand medium punch does, but it is quite good as a poke or as a counter poke, which we will discuss later on in this guide. And it can be quite useful in a way of countering your opponent's normals. This button is not special cancelable, so unless you have the orb on the field of play and not in Menat's hand, so you're not always going to be able to use this button when the orb is in your hand. But what I will say about this normal is that it doesn't change with or without orb in terms of frame data, only the fact that it is special cancelable. It has 8 frames of startup, it is only -2 on block, and is really good as a normal. Really good. As you can see, the range is quite strong for Menat. We're gonna look next at Stand Heavy Punch with Orb. So this is probably her best poke for keeping your opponent away from you. It has counter hit properties, so if you have the counter hit state on your opponent, like so, you will see that it crush counters your opponent, helping you to build V meter but also getting a knockdown on your opponent, which is very good for Menat. The only downside I would say to this button is that it is quite high on recovery, and what that means is that if your opponent jumps at you, you are likely to eat a lot of damage because of the high recovery that this normal has. Next, we're going to look at a Stand Heavy Kick. So it animates something like this. And you might be saying to yourself, why would I use this? Look, it's completely whiffing on Ryu. Well, this normal is actually quite useful because it crush counters at this range, which isn't the most useful considering how much startup it has. It has 9 frames of startup. And it is also quite unreliable as a hitbox. As you can see, you have to be quite close to your opponent to hit it. So where would we use it? Well, it is actually quite good for jumping opponents, as you can see over here. Jumping opponents and far anti-airs. If you want to keep your opponent away at a distance and you notice that they're jumping, you can use this normal and crush counter them. And then it gives you a knockdown and helps you to build V meter. Next, we're going to look at her crouching normals. So, Menat has Crouch Light Punch. This, with Orb, is 4 frames of startup. It is a very, very good poke. It is great for keeping your opponent away from you, but also defensively, it is more reliable than Stand Light Kick, even with 1 frame slower of startup, due to its range. You would often find that in punishes, Stand Light Kick is quite unreliable, but Stand Light Punch will actually connect due to its range. We will now move on to Crouch Light Kick. Crouch Light Kick is also 4 frames of startup, and this normal is not as useful as Crouch Light Punch because of the fact that it's not special cancelable, but what it's quite good for is stopping your opponents from being able to walk back. So you'll often find when you're playing Street Fighter and pressuring people with Menat, they like to walk back a lot. And being able to have a normal that checks people walking back is so important in this game. Next, we will look at Crouch Medium Punch. So for me, Crouch Medium Punch is Menat's best button. And I say that because her Crouch Medium Punch with Orb has 7 frames of startup. And it has great range. It is special cancelable, which means that her buffer game is really good. And when I say buffer, I mean her ability to stand at ranges outside of where the opponent is, and if they move into it, have a special move come out. And this special move can lead into damage or be a block string. Crouch Medium Punch is very, very strong. It has very little recovery. And it means that if your opponent tries to jump over this, it is likely that you will recover in time to either block or anti-air. We're going to move on next to Crouch Medium Kick, which has 7 frames of startup, and quite similarly to Crouch Light Kick, is really good for blowing up walkbacks, except on this one, it allows you to special cancel. So you can cancel this normal into a special move, and it will catch your opponent if they try to walk back. It can also be used as part of a combo starter or a frame trap, which is when you want to counter your opponent trying to press buttons in your frames or in your strings. And you can use this quite well in your Menat game plan, regardless of whether you have Orb or not, because the frames do not change on her Crouch Medium Kick. Finally, we're going to look at her Crouch Heavy Punch, which is really good depending on what situations you want to use it for. So you can use this normal. As you can see, it has a very good diagonal hurtbox. So when I say that, it means that it's great for anti-airing. It has a 9 frames of startup with Orb, and it is really good for 1 anti-airing and 2 being able to crush counter your opponent if they did something that is a crush counterable move, like a DP. If you were to block a DP, this is a great normal for punishing your opponent's DP. We will go into more of this as the guide goes on, but this is a great normal for this. And also, as we said with anti-airing, it can also be a good throw bait, which is something we will again look at in the further episodes of this guide. And then the last normal we're going to look at with Orbed is Crouch Heavy Kick. As you can see, you can score a hard knockdown if it hits counter hit, but even without the counter hit being on, the opponent will be knocked down. It has a lot of range, it has 9 frames of startup, and it is actually a very good poke. It is quite minus on block and has a lot of recovery, so it has downsides, but because of the fact that it's only minus 11 if they do block, a lot of characters cannot punish that without critical art or some form of meter spend. Some characters can, but for the most part they won't. They won't be able to. And it makes this poke very good because the risk-reward sense means that the knockdown, crush counter knockdown, or just the knockdown will be good for Menat in terms of poking and getting space. But also, if you do crush counter, it builds a lot of V meter, which helps you to get your V trigger faster. So that does it for Menat's Orb normals. We're going to now look at her Orbless. Right, so now we're going to look at the normals that are affected by Menat being Orbless. So, as we said previously, her stand-like kick and her crouch-like kick and her crouch medium kick and stand medium kick are unaffected by the orb being in her hand. Those stay the same regardless. And now we're going to look at the normals that are affected. So, I'm going to start with her stand-like punch. So we said that with Orb, it's 5 frames of startup. But without Orb, it's 4 frames of startup. And I know what you're thinking, wow, that's quicker, so why would you not use Orbless more? But here's the tricky part of when it comes to playing Menat. So you noticed before that at this range, the stand light punch would connect, maybe even a little further, right? But you can see now it's whiffing in your opponent's face, and even as we get closer, we're seeing that it has very minimal range. This is quite close to the opponent. So that's how close we had to be to get this to connect. So that's the downside of having orbs, or being orbless at times, is that your neutral becomes a little bit worse. Well, I should say a lot worse for some normals, because as you saw there, look how close I had to be to Ryu comparatively to stand light punch to get the normal to hit. Even for 1 frame less of startup, it is significantly worse. And often you would find that you would use this normal against Ryu just as a way of either defensively poking if you don't have an orb, or a way of using this normal to get the orb back in your hand like so. Next, we're going to move on to her stand medium punch. So her stand medium punch, as we saw, was a great poke. It had 6 frames of startup with orb, and it was a great poke because it would hit Ryu from a relatively decent range, and it was a great way of keeping them out. But you see, similarly to the stand light punch, it's normal now doesn't hit from anywhere near as far as it did previously. So at this range, you would need to be the press stand medium punch, which is quite close to the opponent. It has 5 frames of startup without the orb, so it is 1 frame quicker compared to with its orb version, and it is +4 on hit. So what that means is that you can often get a combo off of it if it hits orbless, but in exchange you lose range, and it's quite hard to poke against your opponent. So you would use this often as a frame trap tool, or a way to pressure your opponent to scare them into pressing a button, and then you could use that to frame trap and then call your orb back and get a combo. That is the main purpose of using the stand medium punch. So we're going to now look at her crouch medium punch. So we saw that her crouch medium punch previously was one of her best buttons in terms of, I said it was her best button in the entire game, orb, because you could buffer it. Now her crouch medium punch without orb is actually 6 frames of startup, which is 1 frame faster than it was with the orb in your hand. But as you can see again, the range is significantly worse, and that's a common theme with Menat. not having the orb in your hand means that your normals have a lot less range at the expense of being special cancelable for some of them. So having this normal is special cancelable with or without orb, but without orb, you can see that the range is a lot worse, and the 1 frame extra the 1 frame faster startup isn't that noticeable because it is so good with orb anyway, so you don't really tend to press this button very often as Menat without orb, unless you want to punish something that is -6 or more from your opponents. Right, now we're gonna look at her stand heavy punch with orb. Her stand heavy punch with orb looks like something like this. Now, we saw how far away her stand heavy punch with orb would look previously, right? But her stand heavy punch with orb is very similar, that it has a lot less range, but in exchange for that, it means that she can now special cancel or cancel into her V skill off this normal. What's also interesting, before I forget to mention about this normal, is that with the orb you saw that it crush countered, but without the orb you just get counter hit stay. And I know what you're thinking, why is this better? Well, this is honestly better for cases where you want to combo your opponent and you get a counter hit here, getting an orb recall, or maybe even you get an orb recall into a combo, and then you can get a lot more damage at the expense of your V meter gain. We're gonna now look at her crouch light punch. So her crouch light punch was 4 frames of startup, and it stays 4 frames of startup without orb, which makes it quite unique because usually these normals get get at least 1 frame faster without orb, right? So crouch light punch is quite good for previously it was quite good in terms of the range for defense and poking against your opponent, but as you can see here, the range is so much worse without the orb that it is almost more worthwhile for you to use either your free frame or your standing light punch, because the crouch light punch seems to have less range than, well, about the same range as the standing light punch. So it is up to you whichever one you feel more comfortable with, but I often find that it's easier to punish things standing than it is crouching at times. Next up, we're going to look at stand heavy kick without orb. So a stand heavy kick without orb looks something like this. It animates differently, and as you can see, remember the range we got previously with the orb stand heavy kick. This stand heavy kick stay is gone to 9 frames of startup, which makes it 2 frames faster than the orb normal, but it loses a lot of range. The one main difference that comes from this stand heavy kick now is that it is great for comboing. So as you can see, we got a counter hit there, and it keeps them standing, as the other one would bring them into a crumple state, which means that they go from standing to a falling position, whereas this one keeps them in a standing state if they get crush countered. But even without counter hit, this normal is quite good for comboing or outchaining into other normals, as you just saw. So you're going to want to use this normal when you don't have orb as a way of pressuring your opponent. It is quite good for pressuring and frame trapping your opponent. And it is also great for combos, as you saw. Finally, we're going to look at her sweep. So when she had her orb, the sweep was quite far range. It is still quite good, but it is not quite the same, and it has similar properties to its orb. So it is quite changed, I would say. So her sweep, like the stand heavy kick, becomes 9 frames without the orb compared to 11 frames with the orb. So it gets 2 frames faster. In exchange, it sacrifices range, but not all that much range where it matters. You're going to want to use her sweep here defensively or offensively, especially without orb, because it allows you to special cancel your sweep into the orb recall like so, which can often help you to make your sweep relatively safer than it would be previously. So I think that so far covers Menat's orb normals and her orbless normals. So let's now look at Menat's special moves. And Menat's special moves are quite unique in the sense where each of her, she doesn't have that many special moves compared to most characters, but her special moves are unique depending on which version you use. And I'm going to explain that, I'm going to break this down. So we first of all have Menat's Soul Sphere, which her Soul Sphere is going to be probably the most common special move that you're going to use. As you can see, we have the Light Punch Soul Sphere, which is done by doing a quarter circle forward and pressing punch, Light Punch. You can see there that the Soul Sphere throws the orb downwards in front of the, downwards towards the opponent. This could be in front, behind, depending on the range you throw it. Next, I'm going to show you the Medium Punch Soul Sphere. So this is again done by doing a quarter circle forward, but this time pressing Medium Punch. Now, you see here, the orb goes straight towards the opponent, and it goes in a straight line compared to the Slight Punch Soul Sphere that went downwards. Now finally we have the Heavy Punch Soul Sphere, which goes upwards towards the opponent, above the opponent's head. And I know you guys are thinking, so when am I going to use each of these different Soul Spheres? Well, you can use these according to how you want to structure your gameplay. So all of these Soul Spheres have 14 frames of start, but they change depending on the string you use. And we're going to go through these in a later video, so don't worry. I'm not going to try and overload you guys now. But they're going to change depending on the string you use to throw them out and which version you choose to use, right? So those are her 3 Soul Spheres, and we're gonna show you the EX ones now. So EX, Light Punch, and Medium Punch Soul Sphere. So before I go any further, Menat, like every other character in this game, has the ability to make her special moves EX, an EX version. What makes her a bit unique to other characters is that depending on the buttons that you press for your EX moves, a different version of the EX move becomes available. So first of all, going to show you the EX move that you get from pressing Light Punch and Medium Punch and doing a quarter circle forward. So that is the Light Punch, Medium Punch Soul Sphere. You can see it brings the opponent closer towards you, and following this, you can get a combo. But that will be covered in the B&B. I just wanted to show you guys that was possible. Now I'm going to show you guys what it looks like with Light Punch and Heavy Punch. This is quite often your combo ender tool, as Menat doesn't have the most range on most of her other combo enders, so you're going to want to use Light Punch, Heavy Punch, EX version as your main combo ending tool to get your damage. And finally, this is the version that comes when you press Medium Punch and Heavy Punch, quarter circle forward, Medium Punch, Heavy Punch for the Soul Sphere. So this is actually quite good because it's quite quick. It comes out very fast, but it also has another unique trick that I'm going to show off right now. So if your opponent is jumping, or it can be used in a part of a combo as well. But if your opponent is jumping, like so, and you use Medium Punch, Heavy Punch, Soul Sphere, it triggers an animation that then brings them down towards the ground. And you get good damage and stun off it. So this could often be used as a combo ender as well, depending on what depending on your desire, what you want to finish your combos with. Right. Now we're gonna look at her next special move, which is her Soul Throw. So Soul Throw, for the most part, has similar properties. So her Light Punch Soul Throw has 6 frames of startup, a Medium Punch Soul Throw has 8 frames of startup, and a Heavy Punch Soul Throw has 10 frames of startup. So you can see there's like a 2-frame difference between how quick they all are. Now, the reason why you'll notice immediately that each of these have different trajectories, right? You can see that Menat goes a different distance, and she sort of goes further depending on which version you use. You're going to want to mainly use your Soul Throw as part of a combo ender, as opposed to an anti-air. This is because Soul Throw doesn't have that same amount of invincibility that is required to anti-air most jump-ins in this game. and thus it makes it unreliable as an anti-air tool. It's still usable, don't get me wrong, but it's not as reliable as some of the other options that she has, which we will go over in another part of the guide. So don't worry. But you're going to mainly want to use this as a combo ender, depending on what's going to change about which version you use is depending on how the opponent is falling down after a combo, which I will again show you guys in a later video. The EX version, as you can see there, has one trajectory, and it's quite good because it has invincibility after its 6th frame of startup. So from frame 6, it becomes upper body invincible, which allows it to anti-air. While it can still be stuffed by some of the better jump-ins in the game, it makes it usable for more than just the combo ender, and then gives you a sort of a reliable anti-air. So I very much recommend using EX Soul Throw where you can. Finally, this special move is unique to Menat when she has her orb thrown out. So when Menat doesn't have her orb present within her hand, she gets access to a move by pressing quarter circle forward and kick. Any kick. It doesn't change depending on the variation. This is one move. It doesn't depend on anything. It has no EX. It's just whatever button you press, same. And it's an explosion. It's called Orb Explosion, Soul Spark. Right? This move is great for keeping your opponents away, stopping opponents from who try to turtle you. So sometimes you'll play against opponents who want to stand full screen and just turtle you because there's no way of you reaching them with your normals, and your orb tosses go above them, don't do much chip damage. So this could be used as a way of either poking against them and stopping them from just staying there, or just trying to get good chip damage on them, as well as a combo ending tool. So you're going to want to use this explosion as much as you can. I will say though, the only time this is usable or accessible to you is when you have orb not in your hand, because as you can see, if I do quarter circle forward and kick, nothing happens. So that's Menat's special moves in a nutshell. I hope you guys like my explanations of it. If not, please let me know and I'll try and work on it for future use. The next thing we're going to go through is Menat's unique attacks. So unique attacks in this game are normals that you have that are triggered by doing a specific command, such as forward and medium kick. So with Menat, you know that her regular medium kick and her crouch medium kick look like these. But if you press forward and medium kick at the same time, you can see that she gets access to this move, which is an overhead move. So if your opponent is crouch blocking and this move comes out, it will hit them. Whereas if they are stand blocking, they will block it. So Menat has an overhead that is actually minus 7 on block. So I'll show you here. I'm going to set the opponent to guard. And you can see that it's minus 7 on block. If you're closer to your opponent, you can see that it's still minus 7, right? Now, that means that this overhead is also quite slow. It has 27 frames of startup. So usually if your opponent is looking for it, they will be able to block it. So you're going to want to use this move at Menat very sparingly. Maybe to close out rounds, or which is actually quite interesting about this overhead is that it is also special cancelable without orb. So as you can see here, I can use the orb recall to bring back my orb very safely to me and make the overhead safe, cancelling the frames of the orb to make it safe. That makes the overhead quite usable, is without orb. So you're going to want to use this overhead either to combo off, because it is possible to combo off this orb, as you saw when the overhead. It's possible to combo off the overhead with the orb being out or in V-trigger. And it is also you would also use this overhead maybe to close out a round or get stun on your opponent if you think that they wouldn't be looking for it. But again, it's quite slow, so please use it sparingly. Next up, we're going to look at her slide. So her slide is done by pressing down, forward, and medium kick. And you would trigger this. It looks like this. It has 11 frames of startup, and depending on how this move is hit or blocked, the frame advantage differs. So if you hit your opponent at the absolute max range of this slide, you can see that it is quite difficult to space. You can see it can be up to +3 or +4, which then allows you to combo off stand light kick or maybe crouch light punch. Whereas if you do it at a much closer range, you can see that it's actually punishable. It's -6. So your opponent can then punish you with any normal that they have that is 6 frames or faster. On block, it's quite similar. So I'm going to show you that on block, you can make this overhead at, this slide -1, -2, maybe even 0 if you space it at the best possible range. Whereas if you're much closer, it will come out and be -10, which your opponent can punish quite heavily. So be very careful and practice the spacing of this slide a lot. Finally, the last unique attack I'm going to show you is Menat's drills. So Menat's drills can be performed by doing down in the air, doing down and a button plus any of the light kick, medium kick, or heavy kick. So depending on how you space it, you can see that it can be plus or minus on hit. So I got it +1 there, but if I'm to do it at a much higher range like this or like that, you can see it was -6. So you're going to want to work on spacing these quite a lot and understanding the ranges of how to space these, because this is going to be quite important for you to learn when you want to play an aggressive style of Menat, which we will cover later on in this guide. So you can see that the drills have different frame data depending on how low they hit. So the lower you hit, the better the frame advantage. And you're going to want to use this a lot. And when you're playing Menat, you're going to want to learn the spacing. So practice. This is something I definitely recommend players to practice with Menat, because you can see different trajectories. So the light kick has a trajectory like this that goes very far forward. The medium kick less, and the heavy kick goes almost diagonally, like directly down below them. So you're going to really want to practice the spacing. You can perform these from jumping forward, neutral jumping, or forward jumping. So again, practice, use these drills well, because if they're misspaced like this, they are very punishable, and they can be used to punish you. Your opponent can get a lot of damage on you if you misspace them. So be very careful with how you use them. Finally, in this video, we're going to look at Menat's critical art. Menat's critical art is quite interesting because it has 4 frames of startup and is really good. It's something that she will use a lot because she doesn't have many special moves or use special moves like other characters do, and her EX moves, I mean specifically, to burn her bar. So she will quite frequently have super or critical art available to her and ready for use. If her critical art first of all is performed by doing quarter circle forward and another quarter circle forward and pressing a punch with it, any punch. So it will look like this. You will use Menat's critical art in many different ways. You can use it as a way to combo off of her normals, specials, V skills. You can use it as a way defensively on wake up, or to punish your opponent's moves that are -4 or more. So you'll find in playing the game more and more that you will discover new ways to use this. So you can see here that I cancelled the super of her crouch medium punch. This could often mean that you can use this critical art as a way to hit confirm with Menat, which we will talk about again in a later video. So now that we've covered normals, specials, and critical arts, I think we've got the first bit of Menat covered. And I hope you guys were able to enjoy this video. I hope my explanations were clear enough. I've never done a guide before, so I would appreciate all feedback for any future guide or anything I put out on the channel. And I will see you guys on the next part. Thank you for watching.